And, okay, shall we have a quick guess? Oh, too late. Magnus has played one d4, opening with the queen's pawn. And which opening will we see from Duda? Will we see the Catalan, which Magnus has played during the World Championship? Pontus, you mentioned the World Championship being maybe the source of a lot of his preparation nowadays. It is the Catalan opening, so one of Magnus's strongest openings. He's taking this one seriously, and Black captures the pawn very early. So a bit of a spin on the Queen's Gambit. Black temporarily a pawn up, but now we will see a very forcing line. Black trying to really force matters in the center of the board. And White's knight jumping forward. Okay, I was going to say Magnus there might have captured a black pawn. We might have seen a queen trade and lots of pieces flying off the board, but no. White now looking for compensation for a sacrificed pawn with quick development. These knights flying forward. And I've had a little bit of experience in this opening myself, and it's very, very scary for Black if you don't know what you're doing. But Duda, by the speed of which he's been playing, he seems to know his stuff. Black's rook there, just backing up a knight. So Black's still one pawn up, but Black's king uncastled, still takes a couple of moves to run to safety later.
Have you played against any of these two, Pontus?
No, not really, actually. You know, we played many times the same tournament. Yeah. Unfortunately, in this World Championship last time when we played in Poland, for example, I was in the other end of the tournament. So I only saw my Magnus at the dinners afterwards, because I played horrible.
Yeah. Oh, wow. How much do you play these days? Are you mostly working with Business Means Chess and Kids and those initiatives, or are you playing a lot as well?
Yeah, chess-wise, no, I'm not playing at all, more or less, anymore. So very, very few games. In the Czech League, maybe I play some games. But otherwise, I'm too busy with everything. So I don't play much. But I know that Duda plays this line a lot. He always plays this line.
So is he one of those players, that has those few openings that he likes to play?
Yeah, we heard him say in the interview that he doesn't necessarily have one specific favourite opening, but he does have kind of backups that he relies upon. So in the very biggest matches, as Pontus mentioned, he does tend to fall back on a certain repertoire. Here with Black, he's just trying to be solid, just trying to trade off pieces, survive the opening. And it makes sense to have kind of a backbone to your openings. You don't want to be freestyling every single game, coming up with a new opening every single time. That just takes too much time to study, too much energy. It's nice to kind of have something like this opening where at least he'll know his stuff. He'll know the plans for the next few moves. And Magnus is the first one to think. Magnus here investing a couple of minutes.
And whilst Magnus is pausing and considering how he's going to adapt to Duda's surprise, well, we already have some selfies to show.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, they're very quick off the mark. Keep them coming. We love them. OK, and Magnus actually playing the most critical move on the database, developing the queen, putting pressure on the pawn on b7.
So still very well-known stuff. This position has been reached before in some Grandmaster clashes. And now White trying to go for activity with his queen, and White's light-squared bishop on a great diagonal, but temporarily the knight is attacked in the centre of the board. So Magnus will have to take a timeout to deal with that. I think the most usual move, as far as I know, is the White knight capturing Black's light-squared bishop. And yeah, for sure, Duda has done his homework there, and the variation continues quite deeply. And this has been analysed by both players for sure. Magnus just trying to find a way maybe to surprise Duda, to take him out of his comfort zone, but not easy to do that. There's not that much choice here for White. Yeah,
you're right. One of the main moves is actually to capture that bishop. There is a second alternative that Magnus might be tempted by, and that's actually to develop the dark squared bishop and protect the knight that's under fire.
OK, so we'll wait to see what Magnus does. Defend that knight in the centre or initiate more exchanges. Stylistically, I think Magnus would love to snap off Black's bishop, seize the bishop pair, maybe get the pawn back. White's queen on this b-file can go and grab a pawn, but that would just walk into what Duda has prepared. So psychological battle right now. And yeah, Pontus, Magnus, he's from Scandinavia as well. Did you have some experience with him, playing against him when he was younger?
Yeah. And I told you some story before when he was... the first time when I met Magnus, he was sitting on 2 pillows and
really?
to reach the board. And he was eating raisins all the time. So and some other candy, and we were like, what is this, you know? And then we saw the moves that came out. They were strong. We were like, this kid can't even reach the board, and and he was playing with the Norwegian national youth team against us and the Swedish national youth team. We were like, well, this kid can't even reach the board. And the moves that come out, you know, are quite strong.
Yeah.
So, but first game, he actually lost in that way because we were playing up in this mountain in Gausdal.
Yeah, I heard about that tournament. Yeah.
And then basically there was huge delay because the Finnish team, they were late, arriving very late.
The Finnish people.
Yeah, terrible. So therefore, basically, we were playing this game, and Magnus actually, since he was so young, the round was delayed with 3 hours.
Oh wow!
So we were playing really late in the evening and later at night, and he had an equal position against one of my friends now, and our coach, because Magnus offered draw, and the coach said he wanted to take the draw because we were all tired of this trip, you know, the mountain up, but our coach said no, he's a kid, he's gonna fall asleep, so don't take the draw, yes, play on. And it was too late for Magnus, so he actually got tired and fell because he was also out of races, so, it was out of fuel, you can say. So he lost in the end, and that was the first time I met Magnus.
Wow!
I was 9, I think.
Wow.
Oh, that's so cool.
We often talk about starting late in the day. I mean, the players here, we saw both of them starting at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Maybe that can be a strategy, tire out Magnus. Maybe that's why he became a night owl, kind of staying up late in the day because of that experience.
Yeah, you know, now it's totally different. I think if you play at night, you will be the one who will fall asleep, and he will be...
You need to play Magnus in the early morning, I think. That's the best chance these days.
This is a really good chance.
Yeah.
Like
So
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. So if Jan Christoph Duda wins the candidates, and maybe Poland says, we're gonna be hosts for the next World Championship match, and the games will start at 8 a.m. in the morning.
The only problem is that Magnus will abdicate his title and not arrive. but it's a good idea.
Yeah. We figured it out now, you guys. How to beat Magnus Carlsen in a World Championship match. Play early in the morning. And they're definitely spending time to think here in the opening. Is this complicated stuff?
Yeah, it's maybe not necessarily complicated. It's still a bit of a psychological...
and is Magnus sleeping?
Yeah, maybe it's a flashback, you know?
Yeah.
Looks like he's frozen almost, Magnus.
This is like the first time I saw him. He has a little bit more beard.
He can actually reach the...
He can also reach the board, yeah? So he's improving.
Did he?
It actually kind of looked like he did fall asleep. The timing here is incredible.
Is he laughing, Magnus? Is he...
I think he did fall asleep.
Wow. Okay, he's laughing. Maybe he realised he just woke himself up. Maybe he heard your story, Pontus.
Yeah. You have to talk to the control room, you know. They have to... So the players can't hear us.
Yeah, so, I mean, Duda now having his first real big think of the game. We did see that knight for bishop trade. We did see White capture the black light squared bishop, and now White has the bishop pair. But White's still a pawn down. Sorry, I'm just laughing at Magnus laughing this time. And, White is still a pawn down, but 2 black pawns under fire. If you look at black's pawn in the centre of the board, the d4 pawn, that has been attacked by Magnus's last move with his rook. And also the black pawn on the b7 square is actually attacked by White's queen on the b file and by White's light squared bishop. So White will win his pawn back at some stage. Duda needs to find a way to stay active and at least to maybe create some compensation for the fact that White will be able to trade some stuff off and keep the bishop pair. Still very tense, but Duda, I think he's paused at the right moment. This white rook move, I'm not sure how common it is, but he definitely needs to work out the path over the next few turns.
To me, is having the time of his life here in this game so far.
Well, I think, you know, he has the kind of position that Magnus excels at, and he's got the bishop pair, you know, he's got some pressure, as Dave is pointing out, against the pawns. But I'm a bit puzzled by Jan Christoph Duda's pause for thought, because it seems to me like there's only really one move that you can play, and that is just to defend the pawn in the middle of the board, as opposed to the pawn that's under attack on b7.
Yeah, so as mentioned, these 2 pawns under fire, using White's bishop as well, eyeing up this pawn from afar. And if you have to compare the pawns, I think this one is the most important, as you mentioned, Jovanka. If you, for example, take a time out to defend the other pawn, I mean, it just looks so clumsy, and allowing White's rooks to get active, this is only going to end in disaster. This is a pin, and White surely will be able to profit from it. So, it looks really important to defend this central pawn. And instead of the move you mentioned, Jovanka, maybe pushing a pawn to defend it this way, which is, this just looks very healthy, very natural. Duda has defended it with his bishop instead. Okay, this looks a bit superficial. The bishop not on a great square here. It could get hit later, maybe by a pawn, for example. But he's hoping that any pawn pushes will just weaken white's position. And now the bishop will go back. Not sure exactly where. But, for example, if it steps back one square, white has actually weakened himself on this diagonal. For example, you can't capture this pawn now because of a nasty pin. So just a bit of provocation, maybe. And Magnus has to decide, OK, whether to push this pawn. Maybe he doesn't want to rush it, keep it up his sleeve, or whether to go and capture the other pawn this time. Maybe white's queen can take this pawn. We could see, for example, a queen trade. And who's better here? I think white. I don't know about you guys, but I'm just relying on these two bishops. And also, for example, after black's rook moves and the bishop retreats somewhere, then white has a 2 versus 1 advantage long term. And you could imagine that becoming a factor. Pontus, do you like the opening choice? You mentioned Duda plays this a few times.
He has played it quite a lot with the c5. He's one of the biggest advocates of this opening. Yeah. But bishop e5 surprised me, I have to be honest and say this. I was thinking about bishop c5 because e5 looks not very nice. So I was thinking about this move, but he played bishop e5 instead, and it's like you say, he's trying to provoke like f4 and those weakening moves, or e3, and then he wants to play against those kind of isolated pawn positions. So with one, white is going to do e3 and take on d4, so they will get a pawn in the center, and then he's going to try to use that later. But white has a good position, so I think white. This is interesting, bishop e5. We will see a little bit more what's... Because if you do a move like this, I don't think you do it at the board. I think there must be some variation before that he has seen in his preparation, that there might be something, where he can do bishop e5, provoke f4. So
maybe this bishop move, he's looked at something very similar before, or it's an idea he's borrowing from a different position. And as you mentioned, this is one of Duda's favourite openings. It kind of looks in a way like we're bypassing the opening, and we're very quickly, if Magnus chooses the most natural move, capturing here, we're very quickly heading into the endgame, which I think would favour Magnus. So I'm slightly surprised to see him think, I would just go and capture this pawn, trade the queens off, and kind of continue the game. But as you mentioned there, Pontus, the other alternative would be to try and use the weird position of this bishop, the weird placement, to maybe push some pawns. Either this one, trying to open up the line for the rook against the queen, or to push the bishop back. Let's go back to the players. Magnus has that choice, push pawns or try and trade off the queens. And it's a stylistic thing here, maybe depending on his mood. When Magnus kind of wakes up and feels a bit fresher, maybe we'll see the moves come a bit quicker.
Yeah. And whilst we're waiting for Magnus to take a decision, I didn't quite get round to announcing Benjamin, but someone else who is sending us a selfie is Neil Young, who is actually watching in Australia. I get this, 4 a.m. in the morning with his dog Ricky.
The Neil Young, I'm wondering.
The Neil Young?
Let me have a look. No.
The Neil Young would have like a blue tag.
He would have a blue tick.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's Australian either.
But we do love this Neil Young as well.
We do definitely love this thing. And we
dog.
also like his dog, Ricky. And here we see Benjamin, a big fan of Magnus. He says, go, Magnus. And he's getting ready with his child.
Yeah. I imagine also Jan Krzysztof Duda has a bunch of fans. I mean, chess is huge in Poland, has a rich history. And now with Jan Krzysztof playing like he's playing, it's booming again, right, in Poland?
It's really booming. As you mentioned, some great players throughout Polish history. Really world-class players. And now, again, just this last few years, there's Radek Wojtaszek, who's a fantastic player, and now Duda as well. And Pontus also mentioned the World Rapid Championship recently, the World Rapid and Blitz Championships. They were held in Warsaw. Poland is starting to organise a lot of big tournaments. Yeah. So, he's one of the catalysts, of course, Duda, but the scene there growing a lot. And actually, just by coincidence, the position has developed a bit. White did indeed go and capture a pawn with his queen. We saw the queens disappear, and White's bishop, after grabbing a pawn, did actually retreat to the square I highlighted. I only mentioned this square because it's kind of the, not the lazy option, the simple option, I should say. But then again, it does block White's pawn, the white f-pawn, from going up and hitting that black bishop in the centre. So I am slightly surprised by that choice of square. But meanwhile, it is that battle. White has the 2 bishops and the queenside majority, those 2 versus 1 advantage on the left. Black has an extra central pawn. And first, Black needs to decide what to do with his king. To castle or not to castle? That is the question. The queens are off, so maybe the king can survive.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because a bunch of pieces have already, in move 16, left the board. The queens are off. So is actually the black king better placed than the white king right now?
It would love to stay in the center, the black king. The only question is, if you keep the black king in the center too long, there are bishops. The white bishops could start to maybe throw some checks at you. You have to really weigh up that kind of decision carefully. So I think that's what Duda has to decide right now. He has to make a decision with his king, and he has to make it now before it's too late. Should we have a vote? Is Black going to castle where the king is safe, but maybe not being able to help later in the game? Or is Black going to keep his king in the center and play with fire?
Castle is my vote.
Yeah, I think he has to castle because there is a variation there. After, if you move your king to the center, there is the pawn there on the b file can maybe move a step forward, and then the bishop is going to be extremely annoying.
Does look a bit scary.
from that diagonal. So I think he will go for castling.
Okay.
Unless he calculates better than me, which he does.
You don't calculate better than most of us. Well, I was about to say, just...
So there you have the answer, yeah?
It's the commentator's curse, Pontus.
Exactly.
As soon as we say one thing, the players always do the opposite.
Exactly, because he has I saw this rook move he has also, that is going to come. So he probably can do this with some tactical things.
Yeah, in this position, the check is coming, as we mentioned, from this angle. And if Magnus does indeed kind of prepare the check by pushing his pawn forward, then Black's rook will move. I'm not sure exactly where, but for example, it will centralize itself. And when the check does happen, now he can either block with his bishop, or he can even just step back with the king. And the king, I think, is far better here than it would have been if it had castled. And it's just more flexible.
So why on earth did Jan Christoph move his king? I mean, he could have moved other pieces, right?
Yeah, I think he just needed to get this rook in the game. That was the main priority.
Okay.
And the only way to get that rook in the game is either to lift the black king off the back rank, or, for example, to castle, as we mentioned. And castling, yeah, it's just the fact the king is so far away from the action later on in the game. And it still takes your rook one more move to kind of centralize itself or bring itself over to this left side. So, yeah, I think it's a sensible move, but it does look a bit scary, as Pontus mentioned, because of White's bishop maybe occupying this diagonal. So we'll see if that's what Magnus does. He could also use a different angle, maybe just sliding his bishop forward one square, same idea, and also maybe simultaneously bringing his rook towards the center.
All right. Well, it's definitely having Magnus think, this move by Jan Christoph Duda. So I want to ask you another question about business meets chess and kids. You told me about something upcoming that's called Chess to Change.
Yeah.
What is that? Oh, and we do have that move. The one that you talked about.
Yeah, at least I got one right.
Very nice.
Yeah, because Magnus jumped over my level. So I was looking forward to play him, and then he just disappeared.
Yeah.
So now we have this Chess to Change, which is a tournament that we're gonna do on April 23rd, where we will have business guys and celebrities that like chess, playing together online with kids, African chess talents from poor backgrounds. So they're gonna play a hand and brain tournament together.
Oh, that's my favorite.
Yeah, it's really nice. Actually.
But it's actually going to be online.
Yeah, it's gonna be online. So someone will sit in Silicon Valley to play, and someone else will sit somewhere else. And you have the kids, some kids in Nairobi, the other one in Lusaka in Zambia. And some in Mombasa, so they sit over, some in Nigeria. So they sit in different countries, and then they play hand and brain together. And
so you're going to team up one of the kids with one of the celebrities or business people. And who's going to be the hand and who's going to be the brain?
Well, that's interesting.
Maybe they can choose.
Yeah, we will see. Because there's always a problem with this. Because some people don't want to be in the spotlight, so they prefer to just say a piece. Because it's easier.
Yeah.
Because if you say a piece, then it's up to the one who plays actually to fix it.
Yeah.
So we will see actually about this one.
Oh, I interesting.
But it's a very fun tournament, you know, and we have done some like this before. But this is it's also very tricky when you organize this because of the time zone differences, you know.
Yeah.
And also the difference sometimes in internet quality can be challenging.
You know all about that, yep.
Yeah, technical problems. But it's so we are looking now for more business guys and celebrities that wants to take part, because it works like this, that they play together, and then basically it develops into a sponsorship. So the business guys, they sponsor the kids, so they can actually, you know, get school fees, food, housing, you know, clean water with a shower, and also, of course, chess equipment, and then be able to also go to chess tournaments. So it develops into a mentorship like this.
A fantastic initiative. Looking forward to that. Okay, we do have a few moves on the board. Anything dramatic happening?
Almost, but Duda spotted Magnus's threat, and we saw White's bishop actually go to the edge of the board. He was skewering the two black rooks on the same diagonal. White's dark squared bishop was eyeing them both up, but Black's knight galloped over to the rescue and blocked that white dark squared bishop's diagonal. So I don't think we'll see Magnus Carlsen make a trade anytime soon of White capturing that black knight, because that would just end in opposite colour bishops. And White really needs to rely on the bishop pair, having them both together, in order to create something here. But Duda really alert, spotting Magnus's threat, and I think it's time for Magnus to start bringing his rooks over. If all the rooks disappear, I think White has a quite stable advantage, but it's not maybe easy to challenge Black's rook on the c-file. Black has control on the only open line, the only fully open line at the moment, and if White challenges that rook at the moment, Black will just back that rook up, and one set of rooks might disappear, but not both. So Duda at the moment just playing solid. He's just trying to keep everything covered, and okay, Magnus switches tact. He just retreats his bishop, giving a check, and now the black king really has to move. You can't anymore block with the black bishop, because then you lose protection of Black's pawn in the center of the board. Black has to move his king. And again, question for all of us, is he going to kind of just go back to the top of the board relatively safe, or is he going to move over, and is he going to continue advancing that black king? Magnus just asking questions. I guess that's all you can do in a position like this, just kind of force your opponent to make difficult decisions on every turn. And the king does go back. This time, though, it's on a light square, so maybe later on White's light square bishop can try to target it.
Okay, so who would you guys prefer to be if you walked into a room and you saw this board? Would you choose White or Black, Pontus?
White, definitely. White is better, but you know, Duda is, I mean, this is quite normal for him. He many times ends up in positions like this, and then he wins sometimes as well. He's a good fighter.
Yeah, his name actually online on several chess websites is Polish Fighter 3000. Because he knows often he doesn't necessarily outplay the top players, but he fights really well. And as you mentioned, he tricks them later, or he kind of confuses them. And right now he's solid. And the reason you say White's better there, Pontus, is I guess also White at any moment can kind of bail out. White can, for example, as we mentioned, go for that bishop for knight trade and just go for opposite colour bishops. So it feels like White is playing for two results, a win and a draw. Black is the one who's kind of just still fighting for that equality.
Yeah, so definitely. And it's an interesting position. Maybe he will double the rooks, I think. Yeah,
Hey,
I was
on this file, yeah.
yeah.
You're predicting all the moves now, Pontus.
Yeah.
I'm improving.
Yeah, so the idea behind this one is 2 or 3 moves deep, but the idea, as mentioned, is to actually keep the rooks on the board and double them up on this d-file, stack up the rooks together. For example, if Black just takes a time out, just pushes a pawn, just a non-kind of helpful move, then White will double the rooks. And now there is an idea of undermining Black's pawn in the center, utilizing a potential pin on this d-file. So, yeah, it's just a couple of moves deep, but maybe Magnus has that luxury. It's not clear how Black improves his pieces. White's plan is rook across and then pushing a pawn. How does Black react? Meanwhile, the problem is, any time you bring your knight back to the center, you lose a tempo, right? The white bishop comes again with a skewer on the 2 black rooks, and the black knight is forced to retreat. And then White can continue with the plan once more.
Yeah, my suggestion for answering Magnus's plan would be simply just to sidestep with the rook, and say, yes, White is great on the D-line, but you can carry on looking at my pawn, and I'm going to take control of the open C-line. And every time that my pawn is attacked or my bishop is attacked, I'm just going to maintain the protection of that pawn.
Yeah, it's whether black can kind of maintain this duo, keep them intact. And it's going to be a bit of a weird situation where black's rooks look fantastic stacked up on this open file, but white's rooks do have some purpose, even though they're kind of staring at this really kind of sufficiently defended black pawn. Once white opens up this central line by kind of levering and forcing this trade, then white also has an open file. So it looks like they're a bit kind of, I mean, not the best pieces in the world. Yeah, exactly.
Or maybe not useless, but just it seems like too little work for two very strong bishops.
Exactly. I mean,
they should carry heavier load.
Definitely. Yeah. These two rooks, they're worth 10 combined, but they're staring and kind of blocked by just a mere foot soldier, just this one pawn. But yeah, once you get rid of this pawn, for example, again, if black just makes a kind of lazy move, then once these pawns get traded off, then suddenly these rooks will come to life later on this file. So yeah, interesting plan by Magnus. The more I look at it, the more I like it. This rook lift, not obvious, but the plan is quite a sophisticated one.
Yeah. And whilst we're waiting for the players to make those moves, again, I'm bowled over by your selfies. And this time, Carlos Zalati is supporting Duda and is watching from the Netherlands just before the sleeping incident. And Duda actually playing a very aggressive move, actually, diving down with the rook onto that ideal second row. It's a nice, impressive move. I mean, I haven't calculated anything to it, but it looks good.
Yeah, visually it looks very good, but there are no direct threats. We do say that rooks, they belong on the second rank if you're black, or as white, the 7th rank, because that's where all the targets are. That's where all the pawns are. You can kind of just snack on all the pawns later on. But right now, all of white's pawns on the second rank are actually defended. So this black rook, I think it's just trying to, Duda's trying to annoy Magnus more than anything. He's also trying to pin down white's rook in the bottom left corner to the defense of some pawns. So that's the type of move that when my opponent plays it, I'm just like, get out of my face. I want to trade you off. I want to force you to retreat. But it's not so easy to do that for Magnus right now. And yeah, very impressive move by Duda. As mentioned, he's just a fighter and he's fighting to stop white continuing his plan. If white's rook in the corner does move now, then the white pawn on a2 would just simply fall off.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, and your idea is in operation. Magnus does not like that rook on the second row and wants it traded. And Duda insisting there's going to be a rook that whatever you want in the matter. And he gave Pontus's plan of doubling the rook. Yeah. It's like we're good.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually thinking about going there to that square directly, because now he has actually provoked rook c2. So if he provoked the rook to go into the second rank, and I was thinking actually that he should go to the square where the rook is directly. But so I'm trying to figure out how this can be a big. Okay. So he was probably trying to do the bishop move central there, and that was probably what he was trying to do.
So black's last move actually prevents white's idea, as you mentioned, the bishop into the centre, just hitting this white rook, hitting the black rook, kicking it away. And for example, if black had moved, then now you force black to make a decision and run away or make a trade. But this was prevented. And Magnus, this is a very typical Magnus type of move.
Just doing nothing.
Yeah, doing nothing, but in a useful way. So just improving the white king slightly, taking it off the back rank, just in case there's some checks later, and also slightly closer towards the centre. And later, Magnus might decide to open up the position, or he might just maybe push some pawns first. Those would be very typical Magnus moves as well. One move I'm waiting for Magnus to play is to push the a pawn forward. This is something we see in nearly every game from him nowadays. And yeah, still tense. It's not clear what black does, because white has really well guarded this second rank using his rook now. And eventually we'll see some trades.
Yeah, and Duda was making my move that I was just going to suggest, because you suggested all these plans of advancement for Magnus. And if Duda just sits there and waits, he's just so slowly going to get a worse and worse position. So I think, therefore, to challenge Magnus's superiority, you kind of have to also push pawns and grab some space.
Yeah, the general rule is that when you're facing against the bishop pair, you need to accelerate the play. You can't let white, for example, slowly just improve, push pawns, trade off all the rooks. You need an active plan, and you need to challenge white before the bishops gain in power. And bishops do gain in power as the game goes on, so you might as well speed things up. And this is actually a bit of a threat now by Duda. He does want to push his pawn forward, team up his central pawns. Maybe then white has to either now, before it's too late, push this pawn in the center and undermine the head of black's pawn chain, the central pawn, or maybe the safety first option would be to trade one set of rooks and then offer a second trade. But even this is not so clear. Wow, okay, Magnus just ignoring both of those options and instead pushing a pawn. He's trying to open up lines for his bishops, also now making it impossible for black to push in the center because then the pawn next to it would simply fall off. The one thing you definitely don't want to do as black here is trade on this square either, because suddenly there are threats. This is a pin. Black's isolated, well, not quite isolated pawn, but the weak pawn in the center. It's not so easy to deal with. It just, maybe you can defend it with the king, but it feels a bit wrong.
But there are big issues. Magnus's move is actually very clever because if you don't trade that pawn and say you reinforce it, what is the response going to be after pawn takes pawn?
This is a good question, Ivanka. This is actually what black ideally wants to do, but suddenly you're walking into the danger zone. Suddenly this king is checked and it can't use the dark squares, remember. The bishops are doing this kind of crisscross kind of motion that we've seen before, and suddenly the black king has to step into the eye line of the white rooks. And that looks not quite suicidal for black, but very, very scary at least.
So probably will move the king, no?
Yeah. Oh, he does take the pawn.
Yeah, then there's something with the knight into the center. But
maybe this is the idea.
So he's trying to go with his king first, no, to behind the bishop, and then the knight is coming to behind.
Oh, sorry,
yes,
not
behind
there.
the pawn.
It's coming here. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, into the center, and it's going to start attacking the white bishop. And actually, he does it immediately. Your idea there, Pontus. So not taking a time out to defend. Duda, instead of just defending this pawn with his king, he counterattacks against the white bishop. So we could see a crazy material balance here if white had taken this pawn, knight takes bishop. The key thing is that black's rook at the bottom guards this bishop, so black actually has two pieces for a rook, which favors black here, of course. The piece is better than the rook, so Magnus decides he just has to run away. This bishop under fire has to run. And, okay, he's going to maybe snake back this way.
And I'm just seeing the tweet from Jyrki, is it? Sitting in Finland. Finns are not late this time. Hi to Finland. We do love Finns.
That was a good way to finish the joke about being late.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so I'm probably a big enemy of Finland.
The happiest country in the world, Finland. We all want to live there. Yep. All right, well, this white bishop retreating. I thought you didn't want to retreat at this time.
Yeah, I think maybe the white bishop had just done its job there, and maybe it's more important, the biggest priority now, to try and eliminate this black knight, or at least put some pressure on the black knight. And Duda, he just ignores it. He just pushes a pawn, covering some light squares. And now, big question, does white go and capture this knight in the center of the board with his bishop? You can actually force black's pawns to be doubled in the center now if you do capture the black knight. But you do lose the bishop pair. You lose a lot of quality in your position. And still, this black rook, on the second rank, it's really annoying.
It totally is annoying. So there's also another candidate move, which is, to go back to a plan that I think, Pontus, you mentioned, and that was to attack the rook. But Magnus is saying no. He's actually pushing forward with his pawns on the left side, and presumably the idea is actually to step backwards with the bishop and interrupt the two rooks' communication with each other.
Yeah, so that key c5 square now, white has a grip on it. And Magnus, he actually did something very similar yesterday in the first game against Ding. He pushed his pawns and it was very, very effective, but then he pushed them a bit too far. So you've got to be careful when you push pawns like this. They could become weak, but they might just gain in strength if they run down the board, or they might also control some key squares. And interesting decision there from Magnus, taken quite quickly. The players now down to around 3 minutes each. This position, despite the fact it's an endgame, we could see some big mistakes strategically, also tactically. No blunders yet, no big mistakes from either player, but as the clock ticks down.
Yeah, but they have played quite slow in this game so far. There must be some time trouble coming.
Yeah, maybe it's just the nerves of being in the final.
Yeah.
And okay, Duda's rook springs forward. Look at how active black's rooks are right now. Some pressure also on those pawns that we just mentioned. White's queenside pawns. Normally you do want to push pawns on the side you're stronger, but here it's not so easy to defend them. And, OK, Magnus has to push this pawn forward, but that pawn as well could come under some fire from the black rooks. Oof, this one extremely tense, and I don't know who it's going to favour if both players tick down under 1 minute shortly.
And Tone from Norway just donated $106. Wow. I can see people from all over the world here. Angela from Greece donated $9. Thank you so much. And please, if you do have the opportunity, please donate to our fundraiser for UNICEF. All money fundraised in this fundraiser will be given to UNICEF and their very important work in and around Ukraine for the people and children affected by the horrible war going on. So please, only today and tomorrow left to make your contribution. So please help us help UNICEF.
And meanwhile, Duda still thinking, OK, he needs to speed up. Maybe one of the black rooks can go to the third rank to hit this white pawn that has just moved. Struggling to find other ideas here for black. I don't think you really want to move the black knight right now. It looks too strong. Black's bishop as well, guarding the pawn in the centre. Just process of elimination. There's not many other things you can do. Maybe it has to be something with the black rooks. But Duda, he's kind of frozen. He's spent about half his remaining time on this one move. I mean, I've been there myself, Pontus. I'm a time travel addict. I know you like to have these long thinks as well.
Ah, do you guys have sort of a similar style?
Exactly. Well,
when it comes to time travel.
Yeah, when it comes to time travel, definitely. I think David is actually worse than me. But he's playing more, so we can say also. So he's handling it better, as we could see in Poland. You know, where you are when you start in time travel. You know, in this blitz and rapid championship.
Yeah. But then, I mean, Duda here. Do you think this is the type of position that's easy to handle with not that much time? He's under 1 minute now.
Wow.
Not easy at all. No, you definitely do have to spend a little bit of time working out how you're going to continue. The problem is, like you say, is that now it's under a minute, and as the time starts ticking down, I don't know how you guys are, but I tend to start panicking, especially when the clock hits under 30 seconds. I actually spend a lot of time looking at my clock ticking down.
That's a very bad tactic. You know, that's an extremely bad tactic. You know this Spanish player, Oms Palice, who just freezes every time he's below a minute. He just freeze, and then he doesn't make any moves. And that tactic is not very great.
No, it's not a great tactic. I mean,
so me and David, we're a little bit different. You know? We don't have problems.
Any move is better than no move, I guess.
Exactly. So until you have zero, you don't have any problems.
Yeah.
We're so used to it also. I think it's a lifestyle, you know, this.
Yeah, it's definitely a bad, well, it's a habit, I'm not sure. It's probably a bad one. But, OK, meanwhile, a couple of moves. Black's knight retreated, so Duda now under 20 seconds. He froze a bit. He retreated his knight not to a great square, and White's dark squared bishop is actually putting some pressure now on some pawns. Oof, OK, he's going after White's pawns now on this left flank.
Can't the white rook just slide over and defend the pawn that's under attack? And suddenly, you know, White can even think about pushing those pawns, and look at the power of those two bishops.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, White's light squared bishop controls all the light squares actually right now. And, OK, he offers a trade of rooks as well. Very natural. White's dark squared bishop actually keeping an eye on two black pawns. Also, the black knight kind of stuck where it is. If the black knight moves out the way, White's bishop is just going to go and grab Black's remaining pawn on this left side. And, OK, I think Jovanka's move was maybe the more ambitious of the two, keeping the rooks on. But Duda, OK, pushing pawns now, creating a path as well for the black king.
Wow.
Towards the middle.
Magnus, with 3 minutes left on the clock, is this the time for him to not play the perfect best moves, but to play the moves that will have Jan Christoph think?
Exactly. Create some small threats here and there, just improve your pieces on every turn. It's not exactly clear what Black wants to do next. These pawns look impressive in the centre for Black, but they're stuck with dark squares. They block in their own bishop. So I here would probably try and move the white light squared bishop out the way, bring the white king towards the centre. He needs to try and keep a bit of extra time on the clock at least.
Yeah.
This one, with best play maybe still balanced, but White is the one who can try to create the threats.
There is a big threat, though, in the position for Duda, and that is to trade off the dark square bishops.
Maybe that's his plan, yeah. So he's guarded his central pawns, the two black pawns in the middle guarding each other, and next the black bishop can indeed move back. I mentioned it was a bad piece, so it can take a step back to the e7 square next to the black king, trade off those dark square bishops. That would really ease Black's task.
Yeah, that's his plan, but there is also a lot of things going on but also Magnus' thing is, like you said before, David, he can always bail out, with taking the knight.
Yeah.
So if he sees that there's any kind of problems, it's going to be a draw.
Yeah, so Magnus has that safety net, right?
Yeah, he has the safety net, but now I think he's thinking about moving the pawn, one of the pawns that he has, maybe the one behind the bishop.
Yeah,
yes, because it's going to be now it starts to get really interesting.
Yeah, it's really sharpening up this game, and despite the fact there's not that much material left, it's so tense. There's imbalances with the pawn structure, imbalances with the piece configuration, and okay, Magnus with 1.5 minutes.
Okay.
I think you're right there. He has to maybe just push a pawn. He could make an argument for trading rooks, but that's risky. If White captures the Black rook, Black recaptures with the pawn. Black's pawn is only 2 squares away from promotion. It can be stopped by those 2 bishops, but you have to weigh up the risks with 1 minute left, allowing your opponent's pawn down to the 3rd rank. Oof, that looks risky.
Plus, I guess then you have to use your bishops defending instead of attacking.
Yeah, good point, Kaya. And that's not going to be very attractive for Magnus. What other? I like your suggestion of just destabilizing those 2 pawns in the center.
Yeah.
And then also it kind of invites the white king into the game as well.
Yeah, I like it too. So the move we're looking for here maybe is for White to step forward with the E pawn 1 square, undermine Black's stronghold in the middle, and yeah, it's hard to find alternatives really. Because I think it's that one or a rook trade.
Yeah, but it's also this, how hard do you want to play in the first game? It's always this, because Magnus knows it's a long match. So it's always this, like, the first, how it is when you play a match. You just played one with Niels there in London.
Yeah.
The first game, you usually don't want to lose that.
Yeah, neither side wants to lose. It's a disaster to lose.
Yeah.
Winning is nice, but it's not going to win the match immediately. So, yeah, some safety first option sometimes. But Magnus, surprisingly, trading the dark squared bishops off, and it was on Black's terms. So the reason we wanted to kind of leave the dark squared bishops on is because after Black captured the white bishop, White's pawn could have recaptured, maybe attacking the Black knight, gaining some time. Magnus now shaking his head.
Also in time trouble.
Yeah, he spent a lot of time, 10 seconds for Magnus, but suddenly the Black king's great.
But that's a very surprising move. I don't know why he did this.
Yeah, I don't know either. And suddenly Black's knight is not a bad piece at all.
Yeah, exactly.
He's going to start jumping into White's camp. Okay, Magnus is going after Black's pawns on the king side, on the right side. But very minimum, Duda could trade those rooks off. And maybe he can just take... Oh, I don't think you can really ignore this threat, but maybe he can trade the rooks off, start jumping in with the Black knight. Okay, it's still really, really tense. Both sides at 15 seconds.
Oh, wow.
The rooks do disappear. Bishop versus knight. Normally it favours the bishop with pawns on both sides of the board. But here, Black has really strong, advanced central pawns. And Black's king is the more centralised of the 2. Okay, this one is still could go either way, all 3 results possible.
He has also this idea to go for the pawns there on the king side. It's just, of course, like always, Magnus sees more, so we can't be surprised about that.
Yeah,
but
he's good in these types of positions.
I think it's just, I can't see. I would never play this.
But I really do think that Duda has actually maybe made a few inaccuracies because he jumped forward with the knight and allowed the white pawns to start advancing. And that I find quite worrying. And taking the centre as well, those pawns, I've sat next to David for quite a long time now, and now I'm always a little bit scared if you advance your pawns too hastily.
Yeah, so at least Duda has a concrete idea in mind. If the white king, I was about to say, if it goes towards these black pawns in the centre, Black can step forward with a pawn, giving check, forcing the white king back. And, OK, Magnus allows this in order to try and create a path in for the white king towards the black pawn. So the h5 square now isn't guarded. White's king could maybe sneak in there. White's going to try and play on both sides of the board. OK, Black's king, this is what we call the opposition, blocking off, shouldering off the white king, not letting it advance.
It's in the eye line of the bishop, though.
Really risky, but Magnus shaking his head. He needs to play on both sides somehow, push his 2 pawns on the left and create something here on the right side, because bishops will be so good at kind of supporting both sides.
But the pawn is going to come and check the king now, and then
forced back again. And maybe Black doesn't need to commit anything on this side of the board now. That tension, maybe it does favour Black. Maybe Black can just move the king 1 square.
What do you guys think? Will this end up with a winner or a draw?
It's hard to call, right? It's still really tense.
Still, it's still super tense, you know. And then one big mistake from any side, and you just lose, you know.
Yeah.
So I think the winners are us, you know, that can watch this interesting game.
I agree.
Who was it that said chess is the winner? That was you, David, right?
Cheesy and
Beautiful.
yeah, easy but true. And yeah, Pontus, you're exactly right, because if white makes a mistake, black's central pawns might just march down the board, make a new queen. If black makes a mistake, those 2 versus 1 advantage I've been talking about for a while on the queen side, that will favour white. So still everything to play for. Stakes are still very high. The one scenario that might end up in a draw is if all the pawns get traded. But how is that going to happen? There are pawn kind of advantages, pawn majorities for both sides on different flanks. So.
Can black get really ambitious and try to decoy the white king and go into the centre? Okay, Duda giving a check with his knight. King has to take a step backwards. And then the big issue is, do you maintain your central pawn? I think you had to. And Duda says yes.
Okay, so black's knight going back to defend the central pawn. Also, black's knight is currently holding up white's advantage over there on the left flank. So white can no longer push forward a pawn without one of the pawns being captured. So big question for Magnus, is he going to repeat the position? Is white's king going to go back to where it came from earlier? That would allow Duda to continue repeating this. Okay, second time we've seen this position. Yeah. If black's knight gives a check, we might be heading towards that draw. Maybe both sides are just a bit stuck. It's like basically mutual Zugzwang, as we call it, where neither side can improve their position without taking big risks or without worsening their chances. So both sides are happy to actually just repeat. And also, Pontus, you mentioned first game, neither side wanting to lose. So again, it's the second time we've seen this position as well. White's king previously went back to the h2 square. Is Magnus going to do that again under 10 seconds? No, he chooses a different square. And wow, he's giving up a pawn with check. This is playing with fire.
Did you see Duda's reaction?
Yeah.
He was like, what?
Yeah, he was.
And that was my reaction as well, you know, so...
And Duda just repeats moves. I mean, he could have taken the pawn with a check, but then this would have involved the knight being at the edge of the board, maybe too far away from white's passed pawns on the left.
Magnus is really playing for the win, so he could have forced the draw instantly by pushing his king up 1 square. That would have been the 3rd time we saw that position. But no, he traded a set of pawns and he's really trying to open things up.
Now there is a super interesting classical move. You know, 1 pawn forward there, just on the same flank, same row as the both pawn pushes were very interesting. Yeah, because you get like some kind of bind now. It's quite interesting, this.
And the evaluation's gone up in black's favour. Maybe that's because all of the white pawns are stuck on light squares. They can all be blockaded.
I think Magnus plays really hard, you know, to win, and I'm not.
This could easily backfire.
I'm not very convinced over how hard he plays, you know, that he's actually right in this position, you know.
Yeah, and Magnus is...
Like now, for instance, he's put his king away, so maybe the knight can actually step forward. And I'm always thinking about breakthroughs, and maybe there could be a central pawn breakthrough at the right time. Yeah. Because, okay, and Duda does play it.
He goes for it, you know, this is very dangerous for...
Now Duda's the one playing for the win.
Whoa!
And okay, here it comes.
Okay, and only one move for white. I think you have to retreat your bishop back to the bottom of the board. If you capture this pawn with your own pawn, black's e-pawn breaks through. You cannot capture this pawn, it's poisoned. That would end up in a passed pawn for black, so you have to just take a step back with your bishop, but, oh, that's ugly.
To B or D?
He takes it.
Okay, wow, he takes it, giving up his bishop. So after the black knight recaptures Magnus, he's gambling on his 2 pawns on the left side there. Are they quick enough? Maybe they are. Oof. Okay, white pushes pawns. Wow, this is so hard to calculate right now. If this pawn is captured, okay, he does take back in this way. I was going to say maybe he could have run forward with the white a-pawn, but that would have been too slow.
But he just goes back now, and then...
Magnus is hoping that despite the fact he's a knight down, this white pawn on the left side is going to completely occupy the black knight. And if we see a trade of pawns, if black's king takes this white pawn, white's king will snap off a pawn as well. And maybe there's no way to pick off white's remaining pawn in the centre. Black's only winning hope is to promote his pawn, his remaining pawn, but how do you do it?
First, you go back with the knight and see so nothing happens.
You wait.
Yeah, exactly. You know, that's the number one you always do. And then you hope that you have something.
This is a miraculous draw, though, if Magnus holds it.
There.
I think he is holding it, because the black knight cannot help its king go and round up white's pawn in the center. The black knight is completely stuck. Oh, wow.
Wait, so now Jan Christoph Duda is looking for a win?
Yeah.
And Magnus is hoping for a draw.
Magnus cannot win this one unless Duda gets too ambitious and moves the knight away, allowing white to make a new queen.
But it's a strange way for Magnus to make a draw.
This is one of the weirdest draws I've ever seen, I must say. Just giving up, I mean, he gave up his bishop earlier willingly, and he must have calculated ahead. He must have figured out that there's just no way through for black.
5 seconds.
Oof. Okay, the black king is going to try and take the long way round towards the white pawn, but the problem is now the white king comes closer. If black's remaining pawn drops, it's just a draw.
But he's hoping to win on time, because you see, this is the way to do it, you know, hoping that Duda gets too ambitious and he will win on time.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes the opponent... Yeah, okay, let's ignore the evaluation bar there. Unless it says plus 100, we won't trust that it's winning for black. It feels like almost a fortress type of thing for white. If the black king goes to the left, the white king also will follow it. And just no way for the black king to make its way round towards white's e-pawn.
Yeah, it's going to be a draw.
Wow.
But it's funny also how hard Magnus plays, you know?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, neither you or me will play like this in the first game now.
So risky what Magnus
so
did.
So risky, you know, and
then to survive by the skin of his teeth like this.
Yeah. But my thing is, though, what was Magnus's point of doing all this?
I think maybe Magnus had miscalculated. I think he wanted to run with his a-pawn forward, but the black knight could have kind of checked and hopped back.
Duda did not repeat here.
Duda not repeating, but the problem is now the black king is completely frozen. It has to guard its own pawn, and also the black knight has to stop the white pawn. So both black's pieces are actually tied down. And, if black's pawn drops, as mentioned, a knight on its own cannot deliver checkmate. So, black just...
There is no way to do it, you know?
Too stretched. The black knight, just not able to do two roles, not able to go on the attack against white's pawns and stop that white b-pawn.
Yeah.
It's just a draw.
So in the end, the computer's always right. 0.00. Doesn't matter the path and the drama to get there.
Oh, I mean, it's a really high-quality game with some interesting moments, but Magnus, I mean, most mere mortals would have panicked there, and he nearly pushed himself too far, but saving the day. And Duda, 5 seconds. He'll just take a few more moves, I think, to realise, okay, there's no way forward, nothing to do, and I think we're about to see that result come in.
Yeah.
There we go. Position repeats itself. It's a draw.
First game in the Charity Cup final.
Again with King G4. So he continue to move.
Both